Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Dragon Prince Yuan Season 3 Episode number 3 based on novel. So let's start. Every outer mountain disciple lifted their heads, reverence in their eyes as they looked towards the Genesis Chi clouds. At the center, Genesis Chi took the shape of a lotus platform where a figure was currently seated. The figure wore azure robes and looked like a middle-aged man. However, his hair was entirely white, while his eyes seemed to contain an immeasurable depth, as if it was the starry sky, giving off an unfathomable feeling. An indescribable presence spread from his body, like the deepest pool, like the highest peak, making solemn respect involuntarily rise within anyone who felt it. All he did was smile slightly as he sat on the lotus platform, while the entire world around him seemed to shiver slightly along with his breathing. Even though he had already retrained the majority of his presence, the tiny slivers that spread from him still made the numerous outer mountain disciples feel a boundless pressure. It was as if they were standing before a god that could not be defied. This person was the ruler of the current Sangshuan sect, Sect Master Qingyang. At the same time, he was also the eldest disciple of Patriarch Kang Xian. Now, however, he was an existence that stood at the apex of Sangshuan heaven and could be said to be a hegemon. Zhu Yuan sighed in amazement at Sect Master Qingyang's presence, before turning his gaze towards the sect master's right, where three slightly smaller Genesis Chi lotus platforms could be seen. On these three platforms also sat three figures that gave off a majestic presence. As Zhu Yuan focused, the first person to enter his eyes was the tall and slender figure of a gorgeous woman. She was dressed in lotus-decorated palace garbs, which accentuated her fine curves. Her facial features were also extremely pretty, her fine black hair pulled backwards, giving her a mature and graceful aura. It was an aura that even a perfect beauty like Yao Yao did not possess, because it required the accumulation of experience over the years. Shen Wanjin secretly said beside Zhu Yuan, "Heh, little Yuan bro, that should be the master of Snow Lotus Peak, Liu Lianyi. People call her Fairy Lianyi. I've heard that when she was younger, she was a famous great beauty of Sangshuan heaven. From what I can see, she does live up to her reputation. Snow Lotus Peak is also one of the most popular choices in the Sangshuan sect. Their male disciples are handsome, while their female disciples are heart-stirringly beautiful. With regards to appearance, they are definitely the best in the Sangshuan sect." Shen Wanjin was practically drooling at this point. Soon after, he regretfully said, "However, it's unfortunate that I won't be able to enter." "Why not?" Zhu Yuan chuckled. Shen Wanjin touched his fat face as he gloomily said, "This Snow Lotus Peak master of ours only likes good-looking people. Looks is number one in her criteria for recruiting disciples, while talent is number two. I'm afraid that someone like me would be kicked off the moment I step into the place." Amazement flooded Zhu Yuan's face, not knowing whether he should laugh or cry. He never imagined a peak master would have such character, recruiting disciples based on their face. He sighed as he shook his head, before turning his gaze towards the other two lotus platforms. The one next to Peak Master Lianyi was an elderly white-haired figure. The old man had a pair of white eyebrows that connected in the center, making the expression on his aged face seem somewhat miserable. Aura rose around the white-brow elder, seemingly forming millions of ancient and profound runes. Every rune would make the heart of anyone who saw it beat a little faster. His Genesis rune cultivation is extremely powerful. Of all the people I've seen over the years, his mastery of Genesis runes is the closest to Grandpa Hayes. Yao Yao's pretty face turned grave as she stared at the white-brow elder, while interest flooded her eyes. From what she could tell, the white-brow elder was likely second only to Kang Yuan in Genesis runes. Zhu Yuan could not help but be taken aback by her words. He had deeply felt Master Kang Yuan's immeasurable strength before, and never imagined that the white-brow elder would receive such an assessment from Yao Yao. "If I'm not wrong, he should be the master of Spirit Rune Peak, Old Man Tianshu," said Zhu Yuan in a low voice. If one were to talk about Genesis runes, this white-brow elder was likely number one in the entire Sangshuan sect. If there's an opportunity, I do hope that I can ask him for some pointers. Interest could be heard in Yao Yao's tone. There were not many things she was interested in, and Genesis runes were one of them. However, her standards were impossibly high due to following Kang Yuan for many years, making it very difficult for her to find someone she could treat with honesty. Zhu Yuan let out a bitter laugh. Given the status of these peak masters, how could any ordinary disciple hope to seek guidance from them? He shook his head as his gaze shifted towards the third lotus platform. Atop it was a metal tower-like figure, an elder that was bare all the way down to the waist. However, the elder's body was not hunched over like an old man's. A dark gold luster shined on his skin, light seemingly swirling on it as if it was made from gold. Faint, mysterious patterns could be seen on the surface of his body. He was also imposingly muscular, practically overshadowing the whitey brow elder beside him. As he crossed his arms across his chest and breathed, the chi and blood in his body seemed to circulate like an unstoppable flood, while rumbling thunder was continuously emitted, pulsing with terrifying power. If he had not painstakingly restrained it, just the rumbling from the chi and blood in his body would likely kill all the Alpha Origin disciple present. This elder had a different aura from the white brow elder, an aura of unmatched ferocity, as if he was a giant that had walked out from the prehistoric era. Zhu Yuan wiped away the cold sweat on his brows. This individual was likely the master of Hongya Peak. Wasn't this Jiyu Hongyi's old ancestor? No wonder she rather die than go to the Hongya Peak. These three and sect master Qing Yang are the four disciples of Patriarch Kang Xian. Zhu Yuan's expression shivered a little as he looked towards the left side of sect master Qing Yang, where the torrential Genesis Qi had also transformed into two lotus platforms. On one of the lotus platforms was a figure wearing a set of simple hemp garments. At closer inspection, one would see a kindly expression on his young and handsome face, his skin glowing like jade. A mottled stone sword lay across his knees, giving off a faint, but terrifying aura. The Genesis Qi around him faintly vibrated, as the cry of a sword rang out from within, as if a sea of swords were hidden around him. All Zhu Yuan did was look at the handsome youth for a while, when he felt a piercing pain in his eyes, causing him to hurriedly withdraw his gaze. This person should be the master of Sword Cometh Peak. Zhu Yuan's gaze flickered in thought. Jiyu Hongyi has told him previously that the master of Sword Cometh Peak was once a servant boy under Patriarch Kang Xian. However, the latter now possessed high status in the Tsangshuan sect. The final one must be the master of Thunder Prison Peak, the most senior person in the Tsangshuan sect. Zhu Yuan looked towards the last figure, only to see that sky in the area was dark, lightning flashing in the clouds as if a lightning dragon was flying within. On the lotus platform was an elder in black robes with an impassive face. Lightning swam in his eyes as a frightening pressure slowly spread, shaking the space around him. Zhu Yuan could sense a destructive power in the black-robed elder's body that seemed to briefly reveal itself before vanishing the next moment. The master of Thunder Prison Peak is definitely terrifying. Zhu Yuan's expression had turned grim. The master of Thunder Prison Peak was an old friend of Patriarch Kang Xian. With regards to seniority, even sect master Qing Yang showed respect towards the former. Zhu Yuan breathed in deeply, gradually controlling the emotions in his heart. These six figures before his eyes were the six hegemons of the Tsangshuan sect. Each one wielded immeasurable power. It was no wonder that the Tsangshuan sect had been able to remain amongst the six sacred sects even after Patriarch Kang Xian's death. Behind the six hegemons were numerous figures that gave off powerful presences, evidently the powerful experts of the Tsangshuan sect. It seems that the internal department of the Tsangshuan sect also viewed this event with extreme importance. On the clouds, sect master Qing Yang cast his gaze downwards. It was as if nothing could hide from his gaze as it shined upon every disciple. A single glance from him was seemingly capable of piercing even the netherworld, allowing him to clearly view every aspect of every individual. Zhu Yuan and Yao Yao seemed to feel sect master Qing Yang's gaze pause, just a little when it swept across them, before continuing on its path. At the same time, sect master Qing Yang's grand and loud voice boomed across the area from high above like rumbling thunder. The inner mountains are recruiting 9,999 disciples this time. A single person per platform. I hope all the disciples will give their all. The top 10 will directly become Inner Mountain Gold Sash disciples. While the champion will be bestowed a Heaven Genesis technique and a single Genesis Marrow baptism. These words immediately caused the numerous Outer Mountain disciples below to burst into a frenzy, gaze after gaze beginning to burn as they overflowed with battle intent. Sect Master Qing Yang smiled slightly at this sight, before his powerful voice thundered again. Disciples, let the peak selection ceremony begin. The instant Sect Master Qing Yang's words left his mouth, boiling battle intent exploded from the countless Outer Mountain disciples, as burning gaze after gaze looked towards the pyramid made from 99 stone platforms. These platforms represented the number of people that could become Inner Mountain disciples, meaning there were only 9,999 spots. In comparison, there were several tens of thousands of outer mountain disciples. In other words, the majority would ultimately be eliminated. It was definitely going to be a highly intense struggle. To occupy a platform and take a spot for yourself, you would need to experience difficult battle after battle. Only then would the other competitors be too intimidated to challenge you. The gazes of countless disciples met, sparks flying. Rumble. Genesis Chi suddenly erupted. It was as if a fuse was lit, tearing apart the deadlock as countless disciples began to shoot forward a split second later. They swarmed into the sky like locusts, flying towards the many stone platforms floating in the air. It was indeed a spectacular sight. Go. Today will be the day we show our might. Lu Feng let out an icy laugh, as his cold gaze swept towards the nearby Zhu Yuan. With a wave of his sleeve, vigorous Genesis Chi erupted, and Lu Feng took the lead to dash into the sky. Behind him, Yang Xiao, Qin Jin and other powerful Xingju disciples also shot forth, closely following behind. Their menacing aura made it such that no one dared to obstruct them. Everyone, let's go too. Zhu Yuan took in a deep breath, as he gazed upon the sky full of glowing figures, burning battle intent rising from the depths of his eyes. Zhao Kuan, Song Wanshi, Xiao Xiao and the rest heavily nodded with equally excited gazes. After 3 months of bitter training, it was finally time for them to show their worth. Rumble. With a surge of Genesis Chi, their figures also shot forth, the dozen gathered figures also pretty eye-catching. In a short span of a dozen breaths, numerous figures landed on the lowest stone platforms. However, with the exception of a tiny handful, most did not linger for even a second, instead using the platform as a foothold to propel their bodies forward again, heading towards the higher platforms. Everyone knew that the higher the platform, the better one would be able to show one's abilities. The rankings would also be different, enabling one to receive better treatment in the future. Hence, everyone wanted to climb as high as they could instead of dwelling at the bottom of the pyramid. Of course, not everyone had the courage. Disciples that were satisfied as long as they could become an inner mountain disciple stayed behind, standing at the center of the stone platforms, indicating their determination to vie for it. Anyone that was also interested in competing would step onto the same stone platform, and begin the fight to decide who would ultimately have the right to occupy it. Hence, in a short few minutes, bouts of berserk Genesis Chi were already exploding on many stone platforms, the figures within engaged in battle. The world around them was filled by the sounds of Genesis Chi clashing. On the Genesis Chi clouds high above, numerous gazes were cast down, watching the Genesis Chi clashes on the stone platforms. Sect Master Qingyang gazed at the 5 individuals around him as he smiled and said, I wonder who will end up as the champion. On his left, the youthful-looking Sword Cometh Peak Master, Ling Jun, whose face gave off a healthy jade-like glow, let out a gentle chuckle as he said, I've heard that the Lu clan's Lu Feng has been recognized as the head of the 10 great outer mountain disciples. If nothing unexpected happens, he should be the greatest contender for first place. On Sect Master Qingyang's left, the Snow Lotus Peak Master Liu Lianyi's long and narrow phoenix eyes swept over as she said with an implicative tone, I've heard Lu Feng has already received much attention from Peak Master Ling Jun. I believe he will likely join the Sword Cometh Peak after the ceremony, right? The Sword Cometh Peak has managed to snatch quite a number of excellent seedlings over the years. Sect Master Ling Jun smiled slightly. My Sword Cometh Peak has relatively weaker foundations after all, giving me no choice but to recruit more disciples. We're still far from being able to match that Sangshuan Peak. Sect Master Qingyang smiled and said, the Sword Cometh Peak's current accomplishments cannot be separated from Peak Master Ling Jun's efforts. That Sangshuan sect is teacher's lifeblood after all. I naturally want to do my part, said Peak Master Ling Jun with a smile. Upon hearing these words, Sect Master Qingyang continued to smile faintly, while the Snow Lotus Peak Master Liu Lianyi's eyes narrowed slightly without anyone's notice. At this moment, a figure suddenly stepped forward from behind Sect Master Qingyang and respectfully reported, Sect Master, though it is true that Lu Feng's chances are great, there is someone that should be able to compete with him. If one looked over, one would discover that the person who had spoken was the one who had brought Zhu Yuan to that Sangshuan sect, Mai Wuji. Oh? Sect Master Qingyang chuckled upon hearing this. Is it the one from the Hongya Peak Master's clan? Upon hearing Sect Master Qingyang's words, the Hongya Peak Master Jiyu Qianhong's lips cracked open as he laughed, before he said in a booming voice, that little lass is quite talented, but she is still lacking a little compared to Lu Feng. If they fought, her chances at winning will not be high. Mu Wuji also chuckled and said, Jiyu Hongis does have astonishing talent. If given more time, no one would be her match in the peak selection ceremony. However, the one I'm referring to is not her, but the little fellow called Zhu Yuan. He pointed towards a certain spot below as the hegemon's gazes followed. They saw Zhu Yuan leading a group of disciples as they climbed to higher platforms. A short distance ahead was Lu Feng and Gang. One look was all it took. Anyone could see that these two groups were the elites amongst this batch of outer mountain disciples. This little one only has the strength of the first layer alpha origin. How did he make so many people submit to him? Snow Lotus Peak Master Liu Lianyi's tone was one of interest. His spirit is not weak, and should have reached the corporeal stage. No wonder. However, she soon sensed the strength of Zhu Yuan's spirit. The white-brow elder also looked down, a trace of interest appearing on his seemingly miserable-looking face. His spirit talent is not bad, he should be pretty decent in Genesis runes. Mu Wuji said, Zhu Yuan comes from the Kangman continent, where he distinguished himself in the Saint Remains domain and obtained the Patriarch's Saint Blood baptism. These words immediately caused the eyes of the 6 hegemons to widen a little. Soon after, all of them fell silent. Sectmaster Qing Yang slowly said, Teacher's body split into many parts when he died, falling onto various locations in Sangshuan heaven to form numerous Saint Remains domain. However, only a small handful have managed to obtain his Saint Blood baptism. It seems that Zhu Yuan should have some ability. The Hongya Peak Master Jiyu Hongtian's 5 fingers tightly clenched, space shattering around his hand. His expression was stormy as an icy voice filled with rage sounded, those Sacred Palace bastards. They naturally knew that Patriarch Kang Xian's death back then was very likely linked to Sacred Palace. However, the current Sacred Palace was steadily rising in power, and there was also the terrifying Sacred Race behind them. Hence, even the Sangshuan sect could only bury their hatred deep in their hearts. The air around Liu Lianyi and the white-brow elder also turned much colder. In the end, Sect Master Qing Yang waved his hand and said in a low voice, Think about the big picture. Fury flashed in the eyes of Liu Lianyi as she let out an icy snort. She looked as if she wanted to say something, but ultimately resisted the urge. However, her soul-stirringly beautiful face was clearly covered in frost. The white-brow elder lowered his gaze and remained silent. The Sword Cometh Peak Master Ling Jun sighed softly. The Thunder Prison Peak Master remained expressionless. Sect Master Qing Yang chuckled, consoling everyone 2 more times, before casting his gaze to the numerous stone platforms below. Amongst the innumerable figures, Zhu Yuan and the dozen he led rapidly ascended the pyramid. Sect Master Qing Yang concentrated on the youthful figure as he said in a soft voice, Let us see whether this little one will be able to give us a pleasant surprise. 99 stone platforms were gathered in the shape of a pyramid as they floated in the sky, dazzling brilliantly when the rays of the sun shined upon them. Boom! At this current moment, Berserk Genesis Chi violently pulsed from numerous platforms. One would see a swarm of glowing figures continuously leaping upwards, jumping from platform to platform as they climbed. There was pretty much no other rules for this peak selection ceremony. At the center of each stone platform was a mat. As long as someone could sit on it without being disturbed for an incense stick of time, the stone platform would close, restricting anyone else from entering. When this happened, it would mean that the platform had been occupied. Any means could be used to achieve this. Therefore, when someone powerful appeared on a stone platform, others might gang up on this individual, making the situation extremely chaotic. Zhu Yuan, Song Wanshi, Zhao Kuan and the rest stuck close together as stone platform after stone platform rapidly passed by under their feet, their figures never lingering even for a second. There was slightly over 50 people in their group, each an elite amongst the outer mountain disciples. Hence, their goal was the top 100 in the peak selection ceremony, and this place was clearly not their final destination. A short distance to their front on the right was another group leaping past platform after platform. They were the Xingju disciples led by Lu Feng. The gazes on both sides clashed from time to time, sparks flying. Although the numbers of these two parties were nothing special when taking into account all the outer mountain factions, they were two most unified groups, hence why their every action seemed exceptionally attention-grabbing. The other disciples on the stone platforms gave way one after another, not daring to compete with these two groups. As time passed in this manner, the two groups of disciples rapidly passed by numerous platforms and began to gradually approach the upper area of the pyramid. This was where the top 100 stone platforms lay. The disciples that were confident enough to come here were all powerful in their own right. Thus, the battles between them grew increasingly intense. By this point, individuals from the two groups finally began to break off and select their stone platforms, not advancing any further. Of course, besides the two factions led by Zhu Yuan and Lu Feng, there were also many other disciples vying for these stone platforms, which consisted of both Xingju and non-Xingju disciples. After all, not every outstanding disciple had been recruited by Zhu Yuan and Lu Feng. Even more had chosen to remain neutral, declining to be part of the grudge between the two parties. However, they were currently faced with the situation of limited platforms. Hence, they no longer cared which party anyone belonged to, directly engaging any competitor they met in combat. Lu Feng was at the very front, his icy gaze occasionally sweeping towards Zhu Yuan, who was just a short distance behind. He had originally planned to recruit elite Xingju disciples and forcibly occupy the top 10 spots. If Zhu Yuan dared to contest, the group would gang up on him and chase him off. If that were the case, Zhu Yuan would not even have the chance to duke it out with Lu Feng. However, Lu Feng had not expected that Zhu Yuan would also recruit a group of elite disciples. Together, they were an extremely strong force, making it impossible for his initial plan to work. Since that is so, I will personally stomp you into the ground. Lu Feng's eyes were filled with ridicule. As long as Zhu Xiaoyao did not interfere, he would let Zhu Yuan understand the gap between them. He wanted Zhu Yuan to know that a peasant like him should have obediently stayed in his shitty peasant village. How could a peasant like him have designs on a girl blessed by the heavens like Jiyu Hongyi? Lu Feng raised his head as the topmost area of the pyramid came into view. 9 silver stone platforms glittered under the sun. These were the top 10 spots. By this time, there were only 9 figures remaining behind him. However, powerful Genesis Chi undulations spread from all of them, clearly showing that each one was formidable individual qualified to compete for the top 10. Their eyes gradually began to burn with excitement, clearly understanding that the true battle was finally about to begin. Qinzhen, Lei Honitao, Jiyu Meng. Lu Feng took in a deep breath. In the next instant, a shout akin to thunder boomed, "Do it." The instant Lu Feng shouted, ominous glints flashed in the eyes of Qinzhen, and the rest as waves of berserk Genesis Chi violently swept unfurled, transforming into streams that bombarded Zhu Yuan's group. Several torrents of Genesis Chi whizzed towards them. Zhu Yuan's gaze flickered faintly, but no change could be seen on his face, evidently having already anticipated this. He extended a hand and gave a slight wave. Behind him, Song Wanshi, Zhao Kuan, Xiao Xiu and the rest also acted together as Genesis Chi flooded the sky, directly clashing against the other side's attacks. Rumble. Berserk Genesis Chi shockwaves unfurled like a storm. It was extremely chaotic. Qinzhen and the rest sternly shouted, "Zhu Yuan, if you want to pass, you'll have to first ask if we agree." "Ha ha, Qinzhen, the likes of you does not have the qualifications to obstruct young brother Yuan. I'll be the one to play with you." The moment Qinzhen's voice was heard, Zhao Kuan shot forward, howling with laughter. "You're going to stop me?" Ridicule appeared on Qinzhen's face. Zhao Kuan did not respond, his figure flashing as it appeared in front of Qinzhen. Genesis Chi rapidly swirled around the former's growing hands along with Deadly Dipper Chi. Boom! Zhao Kuan sent a chop flying, Deadly Dipper winds violently slashing downwards. The two clashed directly, the air under their hands rapidly torn to pieces. A shockwave unfurled as both figures landed on a stone platform and stumbled several steps back. Qinzhen's originally mocking expression had turned much uglier, as he grimly said, "Why has your Sky Dipper hand also reached the 2nd level?" One must know that his progress in the Sky Dipper hand was attributed to the personal tutor invited by Lu Feng and numerous cultivation resources. Only through these did he manage to reach the 2nd level. From what he knew, Zhao Kuan's Sky Dipper hand had fallen behind substantially, making it practically impossible for him to catch up. But the power of the Dipper Wind from Zhao Kuan's previously palm strike had clearly reached the 2nd level of the Sky Dipper hand. Zhao Kuan wet his lips, the Dipper winds around his tightly clenched fists madly devastating the surroundings with astonishing destructive force. He grinned widely and said, "It's all thanks to you guys. If you guys had not decided to deal with young brother Yuan, he would not have given us guidance in our Genesis techniques." Qinzhen's eyes filled with wavering uncertainty. He had indeed heard that Zhu Yuan was giving pointers to Zhao Kuan and the rest, but had not thought much of it. After all, none of them would believe that Zhu Yuan could possibly be so capable. But the undeniable fact before him was that Zhao Kuan's Sky Dipper hand was indeed not inferior to his own. Qin Jin frostily declared, "Humph, what's there to be happy about? Senior brother Lu will teach Zhu Yuan, who will be the true champion of the peak selection ceremony. You peasants are delusional to think that you can challenge the status of us Xingju disciples. We'll know who's right after we fight." Zhao Kuan let out an icy laugh. Without further ado, his foot slammed into the ground, rocketing his body forward. "You're courting death." Qin Zhon laughed in anger. The Genesis chi inside his body burst out, without reservation, as he met Zhao Kuan's charge head-on. Deadly Dipper winds devastated the surroundings, leaving scar after scar on the stone platform. On another stone platform, Song Wanshi stood in front of Lei Hongtao. Lei Hongtao said with his arms across his chest, "Junior Sister Song, your Black Ying scripture is countered by my Red Yang law. I advise you to leave while you can." Song Wanshi softly chuckled upon hearing this. "There's a mistake in senior brother Lei's words. The counter you speak of also holds true if reversed. As long as my Black Ying scripture is more practiced than your Red Yang law, you will be the one to be countered instead." Mockery rose from the corners of Lei Hongtao's lips. "I've received guidance day and night for the past month, and my Red Yang law has already reached the initial stage. In terms of mastery, you are far from my match." As he spoke, red light began to rise from his body as a dreadful heat slowly spread, charring the ground around him. However, Song Wanshi merely smiled faintly in response to the domineering heat. Genesis chi surged in her body as frighteningly cold yin chi suddenly pulsed, instantly freezing the ground below her feet. Cold air rose, completely blocking Lei Hongtao's red light. "Senior brother Lei is too complacent. My Black Ying scripture has also advanced to the next level under junior brother Zhu Yuan's guidance during the past month." She suddenly laughed charmingly. "To be honest, I should be thanking you guys." Lei Hongtao's expression turned somewhat ugly at the sight of the alarming yin chi spreading from Song Wanshi's body. Soon after, he inhaled deeply and said, "Zhu Yuan does have some ability. However, things won't go as he wants this time. You guys may be able to stop us, but don't forget that Yang Xiu is only slightly weaker than senior brother Lu, and there's no one on your side who can stop him." Song Wanshi frowned slightly. Yang Xiu was ranked third amongst the 10 great outer mountain disciples. Although he did not flaunt his abilities, he was definitely the strongest person on Lu Feng's side. She looked towards a stone platform in the distance. Ever since arriving at the top 10 platforms, Yao Yao had leisurely occupied one of them, before beginning to set up several Genesis runes on it. Besides a few ignorant disciples who tried to charge in and were insta-killed at the beginning, there was basically no one who dared to approach her platform. Even Lu Feng and the rest voluntarily avoided her. After occupying it, Yao Yao sat there looking as if she was only going to watch as a bystander, clearly showing no signs of helping Zhu Yuan. Song Wanshi let out a bitter chuckle, before she lifted her head slightly to look above where 3 figures were leaping into the air. Zhu Yuan was just below the golden stone platform, while 2 figures currently stood in the air before him. Lu Feng and Yang Xiu. Lu Feng cast a mocking glance at Zhu Yuan, as he nonchalantly remarked, "It seems that you did not recruit enough people." There was a really superficial smile plastered across his face. "Do you plan to take the both of us on alone?" Zhu Yuan stood in the air above a silver stone platform, golden Genesis chi forming a cloud under his feet. He was currently looking to his front with an expressionless face. In front of him stood Lu Feng and Yang Xiu with their hands behind their backs. 2 powerful presences rose into the air like 2 towering mountains that blocked the path towards the final golden stone platform. Like 2 tigers blocking the road. Lu Feng's indifferent gaze looked towards Zhu Yuan as he said, "Zhu Yuan, this is where you stop." He did not speak any further, his gaze turning towards Yang Xiu. "Brother Yang, I'll be handing him to you. Delay him for an incense stick of time, and we'll be able to occupy the champion's platform." Yang Xiu smiled slightly and replied, "Sure, but you must fulfill the promise you made." Yang Xiu was just that tiny bit weaker than Lu Feng, and came from the prominent Yang clan. Hence, he was naturally not subordinate to Lu Feng, but rather friends of sorts. Since Lu Feng had asked him to take on this task, the latter would naturally have to pay a certain price. "Don't worry." Lu Feng nodded, before his cold gaze turned towards Zhu Yuan, mockery lifting from the corners of his mouth. "Brother Yang will play with you for a bit. I've told you before that you shouldn't dream of taking first place. The moment he finished, his figure suddenly rose upwards, making a beeline towards the highest golden platform. Zhu Yuan frowned slightly at this sight, and took a step forward. Alarming Genesis Chi undulations abruptly exploded from Yang Xiu's body, undulations that reached the fourth layer Alpha origin. Yang Xiu was clearly no weakling. Junior brother Zhu Yuan, why the need to cling so tightly to first place? You should be satisfied that you can already reach top 10. Yang Xiu smiled. His hands began to close as silver Genesis Chi that flickered with lightning whizzed from his palms, with a loud rumble, ultimately transforming into a giant lightning dragon. Rumble. The lightning dragon roared as it charged towards Zhu Yuan. Zhu Yuan's eyes narrowed slightly, no bothering to say anything. Since Yang Xiu was intent on helping Lu Feng stop him, the only thing to do was to step over this obstacle. Although it would be a little troublesome, as long as Zhu Yuan could deal with Yang Xiu within an incense stick of time, he would naturally be able to stop Lu Feng from taking first place. Golden Genesis Chi unfurled from Zhu Yuan's body, taking the shape of a python, as its hiss echoed across the area. However, just as Zhu Yuan was about to act, his expression suddenly changed slightly. A flash of red descended from the sky, viciously lashing at the Genesis Chi lightning dragon. Boom! Berserk Genesis Chi shockwaves swept outwards. The flash of red shot back to where it came from, turning into a long red whip that ultimately landed in a fair hand. Countless gazes looked over, only to find a fiery red figure proudly standing in the air, a red whip wrapped around its wrist like a circle of fire. It was obviously Jiyu Hongyi. Hey, did you guys forget about me? Jiyu Hongyi smiled faintly. Yang Xiu was taken aback, evidently not expecting Jiyu Hongyi to suddenly interfere. Given the latter's ability, no one would dare to snatch any of the top 10 spots she occupied. Hongyi. At this moment, the expression of Lu Feng, who had originally been heading towards the tallest golden stone platform, turned ugly when he saw this, and angrily said, Hongyi, what are you doing? All of us are Xingju disciples, what would the others say about this? Jiyu Hongyi shot an icy look at him and retorted, in my eyes, there is no difference between Xingju and the other continents, everyone who enters the Tsangshuan sect is a Tsangshuan disciple. You? The veins on Lu Feng's head bulged. His anger had clearly reached its peak. However, Jiyu Hongyi ignored him, her bright eyes turning towards Zhu Yuan as she said, go and fight for first place, I'll play with him. Zhu Yuan was taken aback. From her words, Jiyu Hongyi clearly planned on helping him obstruct Yang Xiu. If so, she would also have to give up on the chance to vie for first place. Jiyu Hongyi waved her hand and said in a straightforward manner, don't be so wishy-washy, you guided me in the ethereal form technique. So this is how I'll be paying you back. She paused for a moment, before continuing, however, this is all I can help you with. Whether or not you beat Lu Feng will depend on your abilities. Zhu Yuan gazed at Jiyu Hongyi and laughed softly. He did not argue, instead cupping his fists together. Then I'll give my thanks. With a deep breath, his foot suddenly pushed downwards. Golden Genesis Chi enveloped his body, transforming him into a flash of gold that dashed towards the sky. In a few dozen breaths, he stood at the same height as Lu Feng. Lu Feng's handsome face was currently ominously stormy. He stared hard at Zhu Yuan for a long time, before gradually suppressing the churning rage in his heart. Lu Feng frostily remarked, you really are like a lingering ghost. Zhu Yuan grinned, before lifting his head to look towards the golden stone platform. If not because you provoked me time and time again, I would not have had much interest in first place. It was indeed as he had said. His original goal had been top 10, so that he would qualify for the right to choose his peak. As for number 1, he never really gave it much thought. But who would have expected the petty and narrow-minded Lu Feng to repeatedly target him, and even impede him by buying up the Genesis Beast Essence blood from Glittering Jewel's pavilion in advance? Such actions truly disgusted Zhu Yuan. Hence, Zhu Yuan started his counter-attack. Lu Feng's expression had already fully returned to normal. He stared at Zhu Yuan, a faint trace of disdain hanging from the corners of his mouth as he uncaringly said, are you saying this to make me feel regret? Zhu Yuan, you overestimate yourself. Do you truly believe that you are any threat to me? In my eyes, you're just a dirty and disgusting mud snake. All you are is an eyesore, but since you've now truly angered me, I can only stomp you to death. A chilling light flitted across Lu Feng's eyes. Fine, since you're such an ignorant fool that does not know the immensity of the heavens and earth, I will beat you till you wake up from your delusions, and let you know that compared to Xingju geniuses like us, you're ultimately just a peasant that has never seen the world. When the final word left his mouth, powerful Genesis Chi exploded from Lu Feng's body like a storm. The Genesis Chi carried him straight into the sky, before landing him on the golden stone platform. At the same time, Lu Feng's intensely chilling shout sounded across the area. Zhu Yuan, get your ass up here. I will make sure that you will no longer dare to appear before me ever again. Zhu Yuan eyes narrowed slightly. A split second later, Golden Genesis Chi turned into a giant python under his feet and ferociously shot forth. His figure also slowly landed on the highest golden stone platform, under the attention of countless watching eyes. Two figures faced each other on the golden stone platform. It was akin to the confrontation between a tiger and a lion in the forest. On the golden stone platform, two figures faced each other, vigorous Genesis Chi continuously erupting from their bodies like a storm. Even the sky above seemed to have been affected, turning dark and stormy. The innumerable gazes in the area converged onto this very location. Without doubt, the battle here would decide the champion of the peak selection ceremony. On the Genesis Chi clouds, even the 6 hegemons and numerous higher echelons of the Zhangshuan sect cast their gazes downwards, stopping on the two young figures. Looks like first place really will be decided between these two. Sect Master Qing Yang laughed with interest. Snow Lotus Peak Master Liu Lianin swept a glance at the Sword Cometh Peak Master Ling Jun and remarked, having competition is good. If Lu Feng was the only one in the running with no one to fight him, this peak selection ceremony would be boring. Over the years, Sword Cometh Peak had constantly used all kinds of means to get their hands on highly talented disciples, making them grow stronger and stronger. Although this was done with Sect Master Qing Yang's approval, Liu Liani did not feel comfortable about it. She felt that Ling Jun's actions were disrupting Zhangshuan sect's atmosphere. A face as fair as jade, the youthful-looking Ling Jun smiled slightly and said, Zhu Yuan's spirit is not weak, and should have some tricks up his sleeve. However, I'm still more optimistic about Lu Feng's chances. His Genesis Chi cultivation far surpasses his opponent, is from the Lu clan, and his very stable and solid foundations. He is not to be underestimated. His gaze suddenly swept towards Jiyu Hongyi's figure, as he frowned slightly without anyone noticing. Didn't Lu Feng admire Jiyu Hongyi? Wasn't their relationship supposed to be good? Why had Jiyu Hongyi chosen to help Zhu Yuan instead? The attitude she displayed towards Lu Feng did not look as if she had a good opinion of him. With such thoughts in mind, his gaze looked towards Lu Shenyin. Cold sweat immediately appeared on the latter's fair forehead upon sensing his gaze, her pretty face turning rather ugly. Fortunately, Peak Master Ling Jun quickly withdrew his gaze, allowing Lu Shenyin to breathe a sigh of relief. Soon after, she tightly gritted her teeth as she gazed at the golden stone platform. Lu Feng, you must properly put this peasant in his place. Lu Shenyin viciously glared at Zhu Yuan's figure as she muttered in her heart, as long as you crush him under your foot, Jiyu Hongyi will naturally understand that a mere peasant can't even compare to a single hair on your body. Subsequently, she looked towards Yao Yao. The latter was currently leisurely seated on a mat, not a single soul daring to even step on the stone platform she was on. At the sight of Yao Yao's appearance, Lu Shenyin grew even angrier. She bit down hard on her teeth and secretly said, continue to act. Let's see if you'll have the same expression when Zhu Yuan is crushed under Lu Feng's foot. Under the attention of countless gazes, on the golden stone platform, Lu Feng's gaze grew increasingly icy as he stared at Zhu Yuan, the former's glare as sharp as the edge of a blade. He did not waste his breath speaking, because he could no longer be bothered to say anything. The thing he wanted to do the most now was to crush Zhu Yuan's face under his foot. Only so would he be able to release the pent-up rage in his heart. How dare a peasant like you have designs on the woman I've taken a fancy to? Lu Feng's 5 fingers abruptly clenched tightly as dark green Genesis Chi erupted from his body without reservation. Genesis Chi turned into a several hundred feet wide green hurricane that violently raged around him. The Genesis Chi cultivation displayed by Lu Feng had already reached the peak of the 4th layer Alpha origin, far surpassing all the other outer mountain disciples. Genesis Chi pressure spread, sweeping towards Zhu Yuan. Zhu Yuan stared at Lu Feng. He could feel the Genesis Chi pressure pulsing from the latter's body, causing his expression to turn serious. He had never underestimated Lu Feng before. The latter was after all a peak 4th layer Alpha origin expert. The Genesis Chi around Lu Feng's body grew increasingly vigorous, the iciness in his gaze finally peaking as word after word was spat out from his mouth in a chilling voice. Ju Yuan. The instant the last word was said, Lu Feng's body seemed to turn into a series of after images, as he abruptly shot forth, a fist brutally punching towards Ju Yuan. Dark green Genesis chi swirled around the fist, like a howling tornado that caused even the golden ground below to be crack. Even a third-layer Alpha Origin practitioner would immediately be heavily injured if hit by this punch. Lu Feng had clearly made full advantage of his peak fourth-layer Alpha Origin strength. The fist rapidly enlarged in Ju Yuan's eyes. His body shook faintly as mists appeared, while his body fully etherealized. Ethereal form. His figure instantly disappeared from the spot. Boom. Lu Feng's punch landed on empty air, the empty space rippling due to its power. Lu Feng's expression was eerily cold as his body shot forth once again. A few dozen feet away, Ju Yuan's body had just revealed itself when the sharp sound of rushing wind followed like a shadow. Two figures seemed to teleport on the giant golden stone platform, the piercing sound of rushing wind continuously ringing in the area. They were so quick that several people were dazzled by their speed. However, from what everyone could see, Lu Feng was fully in control of the battle. His attacks were swift and ferocious like a storm, ceaselessly trying to engulf Ju Yuan, causing him to retreat time and time again. Although the ethereal form made him extremely fast, Lu Feng's Genesis Chi was also able to enhance his speed, making him just that tiny bit slower than Ju Yuan. There were many instances where Ju Yuan seemed to narrowly dodge by a hair's breadth, making the onlookers' hearts jump in their bodies. On 99 stone platforms, some of the disciples whose battles had already ended lifted their heads, their expressions changing as they watched the battle on the golden stone platform. They would likely not last even 10 rounds if they were in Ju Yuan's place, before being effortlessly defeated by Lu Feng's torrent of attacks. Boom. Lu Feng's punch blasted empty air again, his vigorous Genesis Chi making space itself tremble. A sharp force pierced through space, landing on Ju Yuan's body. However, the latter's etherealized body merely shook slightly, neutralizing the force. His figure borrowed its momentum to fly even further away, his nimbleness hitting the extreme. Lu Feng's expression was coldly indifferent as he frostily said, "Do you only know how to dodge like a rabbit?" However, his words had no effect on Ju Yuan. He was no fool. Speed was his advantage, and though Lu Feng's attacks were swift and powerful, it would take a toll on his body if he continued. To abandon one's advantage after a single provocation from the opponent was something only an idiot would do. Lu Feng's eyes hardened when he saw that Ju Yuan was ignoring him. "It seems that you believe I have no way to deal with that. I've said this before, no matter how fast you run, you're only a rabbit. Your ethereal form technique is no threat to me at all. Watch how I break your ethereal form." Lu Feng's hands abruptly came together, a mocking smile rose from the corners of his lips as a chilling voice sounded. "Little Heaven Genesis technique, Wind Sea technique." In that instant, Ju Yuan suddenly felt all the wind in the area sweep over, covering every inch of the stone platform. Space rippled faintly as the wind began to take on the shape of countless wind blades. The wind blades came together, forming a sea of blades. Ju Yuan's figure stood at the center of the sea, a slightly grave look appearing on his face. Lu Feng was capable indeed. This method had directly sealed off his speed advantage. "Ju Yuan, I will show you the gap between us." Lu Feng's gaze was akin to the edge of a blade as his hand abruptly clenched. Countless dark green wind blades vibrated. A split second later, they seemed to cover the entire sky as they shot forward, engulfing Ju Yuan, who had no place to hide. Alarm and shock filled every gaze in the area. Lu Feng was indeed a formidable individual. Lu Xuanin's red lips curled slightly, a look of release filling her eyes. To think that a mere peasant dared to compete with Lu Feng. How could country bumpkin possibly compare to a genius from the Lu clan? Make sure to cripple him. At this very moment, Ju Yuan had undoubtedly fallen into the sure kill trap Lu Feng had set for him. The former had instantly fallen into a precarious situation. This video will end here.